Ladies, gentlemen, friends beyond the binary, welcome to the Monday Discourse for today, July 20th, 2020. A lot of 20s going on. Hello everybody. Welcome. For anybody who it's their first time here, my name's Tristan Johnson. I'm the host of the YouTube channel Step Back History, and you can find my work at stepbackhistory.com, where I make YouTube things, or you can go to Step Back History on Twitch. This is Phoebe, my kitty. If we can in Twitch, can I get some Phoebes in chat now that she's here? Hello. My streaming schedule, just so you guys know, just so you don't miss anything. All of this, by the way, being like Eastern time. I stream on Mondays from 12 to 2. Normally it would be with Mia Mulder, but she is pretty sleepy this week, so she is taking the evening to rest, and she'll be back next week. I also stream on Tuesday nights. I do a sort of evening show called Step Back Tonight, where we hang out for a couple hours and play some games at the end of the night, like some Jackbox games. It's really fun. Then on Fridays from 2 to 5, we do the Reactor, where viewers send me links, videos, memes, whatnot, and we... Whoa. That's a good way to get the blood pumping. And then we chill. We watch things and we react. It's fun. We have a good time. I can see that some of the regular suspects are in the chat, so hello everybody. Yeah, I go by he, him pronouns. My work can be found stepbackhistory.com. If you are on Twitch right now, if you have Amazon Prime, every month you get one free Twitch subscription that if you don't use, Jeff Bezos gets to keep your money like some sort of horrible gold hoarding dragon. So if you don't subscribe to an independent creator, you are essentially subscribing to Jeff Bezos. And you don't want to subscribe to Jeff Bezos, do you? So to keep money out of Jeff Bezos' evil, bald hands, please support an independent creator, and maybe that creator could be Step Back History, and you could help me keep these cats fed, or, you know, pay rent on this apartment, or something like that. You know, the things that I need to survive, because if I don't have a fed cat and an apartment, I'm pretty screwed. My latest video came out at the end of June. If you haven't seen it yet, it's pretty fun. It's on apartheid. Fun is a relative term there. And I have a new video that should be coming out in about 11 days. And it's going to be on Puerto Rico. So I finished the script last week. This week I am editing the script. So we'll see what happens. Looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it so far. But it's just a rough draft. I think that's all of the little things. So I guess I usually end up farting around for 20 minutes with Mia, but Mia's not here today, so I guess that's not going to happen. I had some weird internet problems too earlier in the stream, earlier in the evenings or day or whatever. Everything was loading real slow for inexplicable reasons, but now it works, so it looks like I'm doing better. I had to just do a quick reset right before the stream started. So who's here? Who's here in the chat? Who got? We got Sir Zhao Zhao, Black Cat. We got Platypus with cheese. Our internet stopped working, so I'm piggybacking off the library's Wi-Fi from across the street. All right, well, good luck. How long before I rage quit from the stream being too choppy? Oh yeah, that'll do it. Let's see. Hello, folks. How are you? Okay, so we got our first question here. Did you know that last week the Supreme Court allowed the execution of a man with Alzheimer's? His lawyer didn't apply for a stay and competency hearing in exactly the right way, so the Supreme Court okayed executing a man for a crime he didn't even remember committing. That doesn't surprise me. There's multiple Supreme Court cases that uphold the right to execute people who have all sorts of mental problems. That's happened in the past. What's it called? One of the big cases, before he was president, George Bush Jr.'s big claim to fame was that he was the one who pushed for, as governor of Texas, an execution of a man who had the intellectual capacity of a 6-year-old. And he's dead. They killed him. So, yeah. Funny thing about that, you know that the United States actually stopped doing executions until for a long time, until the 1970s, and then it came back with a vengeance. So actually, executions are not this thing that America, has been doing forever, and it's just hard to stop. But it's a thing that they have been actively trying to, they actively brought back, and that's even more terrifying. On top of that, they're having a lot of issues just supplying them because lethal injection drugs, the barbiturates and stuff, need to do those injections. A lot of European companies that they buy them from are refusing to sell it because, it violates the Hippocratic Oath to sell drugs that are designed to kill people. And so they're trying all sorts of new weird cocktails, and it's leading to some very botched executions, which are horrible. Almost as if there's really not a safe and harmless way to kill somebody. And that maybe you shouldn't execute people, just as a thought. Not to mention that, there's something 30% of death row cases and in being exonerated and finding out that they actually didn't commit the crime. Maybe we should not do, I don't know, there's no actual situations where executions are actually good, I'm learning. Or I have learned. I have never really been in favor of executions. It is not justice, it's just revenge. And revenge is a terrible motivation to do anything. Alright, if you want 1950s family values, you need to have 1950s economic policy. Should we want Republicans to start thinking that way? The other day, Ezra Klein interviewed a GOP strategist who seemed to be leaning that way on somewhat. I mean, if you want 1950s economic policies, if you mean high union membership and low income inequality, I mean, that would be nice. But unfortunately, 1950s economic policy also means segregation and I think there was a term, I'm trying to remember, there's an economic downturn in the 30s, the Great Depression, where a lot of the running line in the South was that no black people would get jobs until all the white people had jobs. And the explicit racial caste system that existed in America in the 1950s would not be preferable. And you're not really going to have a stable economic condition as long as you have people who are kept in those positions. So the 1950s feels nostalgically good for white people because white people had the white picket fences and the what's it called? And the suburbs. But the reason why they felt all comfortable is because it was built on economic and racial segregation, and that lots of people in the 1950s were not having a good time in the 1950s. Family values in the 1950s means taking away women's right to work. Women were not largely in the workforce in the 1950s, and black people were largely left out of all of the post-war prosperity. So, few factors there that are, taken away. And just on greater economic trends, the United States didn't move away from the 1950s mindset all on its own. The reason why things were income inequality was so low at that period was because of, first of all, the U.S. had an economy that was focused on manufacturing because it was the post-war boom, and the U.S. was producing 45% of all manufactured goods on the planet Earth at that point. And when the other countries started to come back online after World War II and started to compete with the United States, that's when the United States entered into a period of economic stagnation and had to reimagine itself, and unfortunately decided to do so through outsourcing and greater income inequality, and basically throwing their working class under the bus. So there's really unless you change the entire global economic system, you're not really going to see that change in a meaningful way, is what I would say about that whole sitch. Thank you, by the way, for Lance XX Lance 22 and for Beatus Demand for following. Welcome to the Orc Gang. Thank you. How do you feel about giving businesses subsidies in exchange for hiring more people and paying them more? That's how GOP strategists responded when Ezra suggested that the U.S. should have a job guarantee. That's an example of like that's neoliberal bullshit gone to the next level. Like this strategist is obviously like that's just a lie. It's a fucking like what's it called? You can't just like what? How do you like giving them subsidies in exchange? Like they can afford it. Like that's the thing is a lot of these corporations can afford this shit. They just don't. It's like Amazon. Like Jeff Bezos is almost a trillionaire. Like if Jeff Bezos has made billions of dollars like a week now, an unimaginable amount of money, and to say like, oh, we need to give Jeff Bezos more money so that he'll pretty please like start paying his employees a living wage is, first of all, not going to work, because you try to pass a law like that, nobody's actually going to have any real like that the requirements that are involved in that are never going to be favorable to workers. That kind of top-down approach has never been what employers respond to. And on top of that, like, you know, like, on top of that, like, so, like, they'll find, like, they have powerful lawyers and they have tricksy ways that they'll find ways to technically fulfill said thing without, to the minimum amount possible while still receiving the subsidy. So, like, they will find a way to not ever, like, get the wages that they need to get, and they'll still take it, like, and also to pay for those subsidies, the U.S. government would have to tax, and the tax rates on the rich people are so low that you would basically be fleecing working class people to give to corporations so that they could possibly pay working class people more. You see where like the problem is. You need like, so like really like there's two things. One, power doesn't respond to appeals that are against their self-interest. That just never will be the case. You're never going to convince Jeff Bezos to give up his money, because giving up his money doesn't benefit Jeff Bezos. That's just, you know, that's just how class interests work. And really, there's no way to get around class interests. The only way is to have power, or to get actual power, is to challenge the powerful with power of our own. I.e., they need to make companies ungovernable. Like, there has to be mass, like, protest action and unionization has to basically make governing or running companies completely undoable. That's why strikes work. In order to force them in order to get their own class self-interest aligned with giving concessions in order to stop the stem of loss. That's like really the only way that you're ever going to get ever going to exert any force. Because any sort of policy that is essentially a long-winded way of saying, pretty please give us more money, is never going to work. You need to have some sort of force behind it, whether it be threat of a strike, i.e. like unionization, that's why unions do what they do and why they work, or it'll have to be civil disruption, kind of like what's going on with Black Lives Matter. Like, that needs to keep going until the government realizes that it will be impossible. They will be bleeding resources, and it'll be impossible to govern the country until this ends. And that's the only really way that we can exert power in this situation. I mean, I guess there is like another way, which is to just destroy these mantles physically with, like, you know, weapons and stuff like that. But so it makes me think that their weapons are bigger, so that's not really an option we have at the moment. But really, like, I just finished Stamped from the Beginning, and the epilogue sort of talks about this quite a bit, which is like, it's when you're fighting self-interest, you have to either make their self-interest forced to be in line with ours through threats of disruption. Like that's really like the only way you're going to make change. You're never going to be able to appeal to people's higher motives. You're not going to be able to have that conversation where you have you just educate somebody enough, or you just you do the heartfelt speech and you change somebody's mind and they will vote against their own self-interest. That by and large doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen in the sort of levels that need to happen in order for it to work. So what it sounds like is that this random GOP strategist who sounds like a fucking asshole should, first of all, learn even a little bit of history, because his appeal to the 1950s is like white supremacist as fuck, but also and misogynist as fuck. But then also to say that and then also asking for a regressive tax to tax the working class in order to give it back to them in the form of wages, which will do nothing, but will make them look like they're doing something, which is like peak U.S. government. And I think that we need to learn now that there is never going to be, like, good things are never going to come from the top. There's not going to be a right president or right politician or anything like that that is ever going to actually fix any of our problems. The problems need, like, power belongs in the hands, or power right now rests in the hands of people who give zero fucks about you living, dying, or having any sort of stable life. They will never give it up. It is not in their self-interest to give you anything. It needs to be taken by force. Their arm needs to be twisted. There is no other way to do it. Joe Biden's not going to do shit for you unless he actually thinks he's going to lose the election if you don't vote for him. No Democratic politician is going to push for policies you want unless they actually think they're either going to not get elected, or they think that, like, the stability of the government is at stake, unless they do something. That is like the only situation in which you can do that. So yeah, that's the only political solution. Nothing else actually works. Everything else is just window dressing or platitudes. When Charles C. Mann talks about the Seminole in 1493, he says that when the Seminole took in runaway slaves, they treated them like feudal peasants, i.e. they give them land to farm in exchange for some tribute. Is that accurate? I don't know. My guess is Charles C. Mann knows better than I do. Yeah. Is Mia okay? Yeah, as far as I know, she just told me that she was tired and that she needs to take some rest. That's about it. Sam and I didn't get the apartment, Tristan. Someone else paid $400 more for it. Oh yeah, that sucks. Yeah, when I moved into my apartment in Toronto, we had to outbid somebody for it too, which is a horrible feeling, and I hate that shit. What are going to be the long-term effects of keeping schools closed for a year and a half? What's going to happen when the thing is over and we have all these kids who are like 18 months behind where they should be academically? I don't know. They graduate university at 23 instead of 22? Ooh. I feel like that's a better outcome than them being dead, or like, hundreds of thousands of people being dead as a result. Like, I'd rather they get half-assed schooling during the quarantine, then go back to regular school, and then maybe graduate a year later than they would have normally, and not have COVID-related outbreaks. I know, controversial statement that I'm against the spread of COVID-19, which is apparently now what everybody wants. But I don't see why, what's it called? Disasters cause, years of school to be lost all the fucking time. And people like a round of kids being 1 year behind. Like we had that kind of situation here in Ontario when they changed, just because they changed the curriculum, and you ended up with 2 years of graduating classes for a couple years. What I would say to that is it does result in very competitive universities, but I think that COVID's already going to cause that because there's 2 graduating classes trying to apply to universities, which cause like a glut in the system. But I think that's going to happen anyway, because there's a lot. I was reading some articles about how the entire like education system is going to be completely changed, because like universities are going to, like, a lot of universities are going to shut down, especially like public ones. Like we might see the first like shrinking of the education economy for the first time since like the 1860s, which means that we might see some universities close. And if that's the case, then the amount of spots for universities is going to be more competitive anyway. So this is just going to make an already bad situation worse. But that's one aspect. Like, for the most part, like it like in the grand scheme of things, not killing thousands of people feels worth it than making sure that that our extraordinarily broken education system, which treats children and young people like they're fucking objects being built in a factory, maybe, slows down the production line for a year. I'd really prefer, something else, Can you watch funny video of kid doing Lego challenge? OMG. Okay, well, what? I don't know what that is. Will you go back to doing subscriber appreciation day streams again now that you're back on YouTube? I don't know. It's like figuring out what to do with subscriber. So for anybody who doesn't know, like about a year ago, I stopped doing these, but subscriber appreciation day was a monthly stream where I would talk to like a spilled some water on my shirt, and now I'm like self-conscious of it. Was a once a month stream where I would interview a YouTube creator or some sort of online personality, and do a sort of community-led Q&A and interview thing. I stopped doing it because I moved to Twitch, and I didn't really know how to pick it up after that. And I'm still on the fence because like they were sometimes painful to arrange, but they were good. I liked them. And I'd like to figure out how to get them to come back again in a way that actually feels like it, like it's, in some way that I can keep doing regularly instead of like kind of being so ad hoc about it, When you get a chance, look up the new D&D book for Icewind Dale. I mean, I've heard about it. I'm not going to buy it. I don't typically buy the prepackaged adventures. I buy like the setting books and the monster manuals and stuff like that. Like, there's a new one coming out tomorrow that I'm excited to take a look at. That's like based on ancient Greece. That'll be fun. But all I know about Icewind Dale is it's a D&D adventure that takes place in snowy places, and it's kind of more horror themed. That's about all I know. But I'm not like every D&D game that I've ever played or run has been homebrew stuff. Like, I don't know of anybody who just runs the books. I'd love to run the books. I tried to run one of the books with Kelly, just like one-on-one, but that was weird and awkward. And I don't know, just every time I like say I want to run one of the books, everyone's like, no one's super interested. Everyone wants to do something homebrew. And I find a lot of, as somebody who is a perpetual dungeon master, I find it more fun to make cool homebrew stuff than to run a game out of a box. So I don't know. I don't see much desire. I don't have much desire to look at Icewind Dale personally. But there is there is a book that's going to have a whole bunch of new Greek monsters coming out tomorrow. And I hope it's going to arrive tomorrow. And then there's like what? There's lion people and satyrs that you can play as. That sounds fun. And then basically like a Hercules type class for the paladin. So it's like, it'll be fun. I have the Ravnica book. We'll see what comes. Like I see, like when I look at my shelf here, I see I've got Player's Handbook, Xanathar's, Mordenkainen's. I tried to run Waterdeep Dragon Heist with my wife, but it never really caught on. So like, I do have. That's the only adventure book I have. All right, before we lose everybody who doesn't care about D&D, I'm gonna move along. If you go to Miniature Market, you can get the alt book cover for cheaper. Cool. Unfortunately, the Theros book, I already bought. I want to do a follow-up on something you said last Friday. You said the RCMP was created to suppress communists, but I thought they were created to clear out the western provinces. I think they were, like, created and then they were massively expanded at two different times. And one time was, like, basically indigenous removal, and the second time was as a backlash against the Great Depression era socialist movements that they needed to suppress and destroy. But I mean, what are cops for? Those are two main jobs: to enforce a white supremacist racial hierarchy and to suppress organized labor. I really don't know if there is any other function of the police except for those two actions. I guess there is, like, they pretend to do anything else. I guess pulling people over for speeding. And then all the other things are, like, to receive phone calls when crimes happen, to then show up and just be like, and then walk away and then never do anything again. Oh, and to oppress sex workers, of course. That's about the limit of what police do. Wasn't the 70s when the culture war became a thing? I seem to remember reading that's when they started doing being big on abortion too. Yeah. For a long time, anti-abortion people were limited to Catholics. Catholics were the only people who were really against abortion. But then there was a unholy alliance where a lot of the evangelical churches, I think it was like in the 1960s or 1970s, they were like, we don't pay taxes because we stay out of politics. And then they're like, well, what if we paid our taxes and got involved in politics? And so evangelicals got more involved in culture war shit. And one of them was making an alliance with Catholics to oppose abortion and to oppose women entering the workforce. One of the big things that they got big on, I think the thing that really sparked Christians or evangelical Christians to become more overtly political, was desegregation. They didn't like desegregation of religious schools, and so they entered politics that was the first big Christian right culture war, was to oppose desegregating Christian schools. But then, it spilled over into all sorts of things. Then it became a reliable section of the right of the or a reliable section of the Republican conservative base that wanted that people wanted to vote, that they were a voting bloc, and so the Republicans started shilling for them. And all of that basically turned them into a reliable thing. And now they are a part of the political fabric of this horrible, horrible country's history. So that's part of the thing. But it all has its start to the opposition of desegregation. So, anti-busing, those kinds of people. That's where the Christian right got its start. Because before mid-century, people didn't care. There was like nobody really like evangelical Christians really did stick to the idea that religion and politics should be separate and that they did their own thing. Then they were like, hey, we can impose our religious beliefs on other people. And then they were like, well, we got to get on that. And it began. That's how it all started. And that's how the origin story of that bullshit comes from. I finally finished How Nonviolence Protects the State at the end of the book. Peter Gilderloos suggests that the left needs to create an honor culture wherein it's considered wrong or shameful to do harm against agents of the state, anything other than combat situations. He believes just a culture will prevent stuff like left-wing militias doing massacres of disarmed cops. Do you think that works? It seems kind of idealistic to me. It does sound kind of idealistic. That we just need to create a culture. Anytime we're like talking about like really creating a new culture out of for explicit political aims, it's going to be fraught with backlash and hard work. Let's not. So have you heard the 5-4 podcast? It's about the Supreme Court. The Law Boys is the host. It's leftist. It's great. I haven't heard of that one, but yeah. Is Mia coming on today? No, she is taking a rest. There was a guy who asked to be executed by firing squad because he took medicine that would make the injections useless. Oh, there you go. Technically, there are ways to safely and painlessly kill people, but the people who are in favor of capital punishment exclusively do not want to use those methods because the person being executed suffering is actually the point. Gross. That's really gross. Because, I guess you could just you could probably just put somebody in a chamber with an inert gas and that would kill them, right? Like, if you just, put somebody into a room and then just pumped it full of nitrogen, they would just get sleepy and then fall asleep and die. Wouldn't it? Isn't that... guess that would be the way you'd do it, right? Or... That's how they euthanize animals. I don't like the idea. Every time I think about killing people, it's like, ugh, goddamn. There's no way to execute people that doesn't sound like you're a fucking monster, because you are. You couldn't be openly gay and keep a job in the 1950s. Not even that. You had, in some situations, in the State Department, you had McCarthyist, witch hunters who were actively searching for secret gay people in the military and in the what's it called, in the State Department, and actively tried to find them so that they could out them and fire them. Why capital punishment is bad? Because the point isn't really to protect people, eliminating bad people, but to make people suffer. Ugh. America, they don't use firing squad because it's cruel and unusual, unlike other execution methods. Hey, Denkong223, welcome to our gang. Thank you for following. Whew. The fact that it wasn't for life, what made a white indentured servant better than being a black slave circa 1820s? You could get out. A white indentured servant was only a servant as long as their servitude lasted. They had a way out. Black slaves were permanently and forever stuck being slaves. Them and their children and their children's children forever. Also, that meant that slaves' owners were owned their children. There were forced breeding programs. I have a plan on making a video someday about how there were slave breeding plantations. after the end of the international slave trade or the importation of slaves in the United States. And on top of that, just black slaves were treated much worse than indentured servants, because indentured servants might one day be a free person who owns their own property. So, and yeah, legal rights. Indentured servants had some legal rights while blacks did not. So there's a lot of reasons. Not calling you out, but mental age is really a problematic concept. It's usually wrong because you can't see into someone's head, and medical industry makes all kinds of incorrect assumptions. There's also the problem that pretty much anyone that's not ace has gone through puberty has sexual feelings. When you say someone is mentally sick, that's left out. A better way would be to say severe developmental and cognitive impairments. Well, consider myself educated. Sorry about that. That's just, what's it called? I didn't really think about it that much. That was just the way it was described to me like years ago. Hey, Dry Hickey. Thank you for following. Welcome to the Orc Gang. Interesting name. Is Birdie in the chat? If Birdie is in the chat, you should link to your things, because Birdie makes good art and illustrations that you should buy. This month has been insanely expensive, but we're coming close to the end of a D&D campaign where I'm a player, and like I want to draw this character, but we spent a lot of money moving, paying for movers and a new mattress and some accounting stuff has been pretty intense. So probably have to wait until a little bit until I pay myself out of debt for that one. Ugh, I'm not a rich man. So I'm going into a bunch of debt this month. I also lost a very, very, I won't complain about money troubles. That's not content anybody wants to see. Hey, Shaker37, thank you for subscribing. You are feeding a cat. You're feeding 2 cats. Thank you very much. $2 is going to pay for several cans of cat food, so I appreciate it. Been thinking and writing about the Mau Mau crisis a lot lately. Currently hey, thank you, Lugster, for subscribing. Much appreciated. You guys all rule. Been thinking about writing about the Mau Mau crisis a lot lately. Currently making a documentary about it. What are your thoughts on the British colonial Kenya and the Mau Mau? Well, Jen Baker, you are in luck, because I did a lot of thinking about the Mau Mau massacre. What you would like to watch, I think it's been published. There is a YouTube channel called The Cold War that has a video on the Mau Mau massacre. And ya boy, Tristan, wrote it. So if you really want what my thoughts are, you can watch the Cold War video on it, because that was my work. So there you go. Cold War, good YouTube channel. I write scripts for it. Working on one right now about the formation of the CIA. Ooh. Do you think nation states in the Balkans count as colonialism? A lot of parts of Serbia, Greece, Bulgaria, Turkey, and multi-ethnic populations that were either genocided or ethnically cleansed. But it was land that these very nations commingled in for like centuries. Do you think the nation states in the Balkans count as colonialism? I just think that it just shows that nation states just don't fucking work. The Balkans and the Middle East are like the 2 great case studies to show why nation states as a concept are a bad idea. And nations, because these regions have multiple and overlapping ethnic and religious and linguistic identities that the idea even being floated basically caused a lot of like lockdown and ideas. Like, I feel like nationalism and the idea of the nation state has been one of the most destructive ideas in human history. Because, yeah, like in places like the Balkans, where people have been living in these multi-ethnic societies, multi-religious societies that were, big and messy and had lots of different people living in different places and ethnic enclaves and all sorts of stuff. All that stuff, for centuries, results in, what's it called? Results in, as you mentioned, genocide and ethnic cleansing. The idea of nation states is why all of the ethnic Turks were kicked out of Greece, and all of the ethnic Greeks were kicked out of Turkey. A region that had, Greeks living in it for hundreds, if not thousands of years. That's like, it's bad. Don't do that. How much do you know about Yugoslavia after World War II? Who was in power? Was it the Croatians or the Serbians, or did it depend on where in Yugoslavia? I don't really know that much about Yugoslavia, to be honest. Can a communist dictator turn into a fascist dictatorship? Lance made that claim about China the other day. I mean, yeah. If you, like, what's it called? You saw maybe like bits of that direction moving during the the Stalin years, where you had communist dictatorship, but then like during the war pushed like a sort of form of patriotic nationalism that then could have definitely could have turned into like hatred against non-ethnic Russians. Yeah, red browning is a thing. I mean, that's basically what Amy Teresa's entire career is. How exactly would a job guarantee work? Would the state just constantly fund projects or jobs that would have spare jobs in various economic sectors that people would go into if you went to a job center? Yeah. A jobs guarantee basically means that there will always be something, like if you have no other job, if you have no other job to get into, just sign up somewhere and you'll get a job. This happened during the Great Depression, where they let lots and lots of young men go out to young men who have spent their entire life living in Manhattan. They would load up onto trucks and send them to national parks to build roads and pretty them up. Or they'd send them off to the middle of nowhere to build bridges and stuff like that. You would be funding infrastructure construction projects, various different things that need to be done that the private sector is not doing, and you would hire anybody to do the jobs, just so that there was no such thing as somebody who was unemployed. That's basically a jobs guarantee. It's a big program, but it was shown during the Great Depression to be extremely effective at restarting the economy, and it would help quite a bit. And it would help a lot for political stability. Not that, I actually think the political instability right now in America is kind of constructive with protests and riots going on. But, the reason why, the COVID connection with what's going on in America with the Black Lives Matter protests right now is that there are a lot of people who don't have to worry about losing their jobs because they already lost their jobs. They don't really have to worry about going home because they might get evicted soon. And so you're just going to have a huge population of people who have nothing and nowhere to go. Hey, DanKong223, thank you for subscribing at Tier 2. Much appreciated. You guys are being really kind to me today. I appreciate it. Makes keeping this business going worthwhile, especially in this was a very expensive month for us. So moving is never cheap, right? So it's really kind of you. But so to continue on my point about jobs guarantees, is that the kind of New Deal job guarantee programs were a way to prevent communist and fascist uprisings, because he was Oh my, Birdie, thank you for gifting 5 subscriptions. That's so kind. And look, Phoebe showed up to say thank you. Right, Phoebes? Oh my. Logan Scott Anderson, thank you very much. Or is that, oh, it's a gift. That's all the gifts coming through. Okay. Well. Everyone gets some emotes, so now we can get lots of Phoebes in chat. Right? Right now we're trying to learn how to train Phoebes because she's being very, very bratty in this apartment. And we're trying to keep her off of certain things. Like this girl. I love her to death. You know, it's a time where I don't love her to death is when it is 5:30 in the morning and she is attacking the blinds in our bedroom. Yes. Yeah, that's a time when my love for you is definitely tested. Mm-hmm. Birdie, you're a freaking pro. I don't deserve you. But yeah. Phoebe likes to attack blinds. She loves jumping on the counter. And, yeah. And she does love jumping into situations where we're not exactly sure if she knows how to get down. That's fun. And she's also, I don't know if this will surprise any of you guys, but she's also one of those cats that if she feels like it, she will knock things off of tables. Like if there's a thing on a table and she's on the table and she wants your attention, she'll just start knocking stuff off of the table. That is a Phoebe action. So she can be a little bit of a brat, but she's very cute, so she gets away with way too much. Right? So jobs guarantees. So there's this whole FDR had this mentality that I don't think is wrong, that a lot of unemployed young men is a dangerous combination. Unemployed young men, a lot of high unemployment amongst young men is, at least in the 1930s, but I would imagine that even today, to some extent, is a recipe for political instability. Can be said of Tunisia, can be said of a lot of, high unemployment among young men in the Middle East was definitely a contributing factor to the Arab Spring, and who knows where to go. Hey, Chrisiosity's in the chat. Hello. Yes, this is Phoebe. She's hanging out with me, as she does. Okay, what was the last thing I looked at here? Thoughts on individualism. I've been thinking about how individualism and not conforming often leads to leftism, but also how it's a capitalist value, and I was wondering how it can be reconciled. I think there's very much a lot of... Okay. So I would say that... Oh, that's somebody with a package. That's probably the coffee, the Splenda we ordered. So, individualism versus collectivism, I think that they are sort of independent of politics. Hey, Sci-Fi Wasabi, thank you for following. And very much how, and also not mutually exclusive, I would think. Like, to say that individualism versus collectivism is a thing is to sort of... is to make a claim that intentionally frames these things at odds. Like a lot of libertarians would try to set it up, and also a lot of authoritarians would try to set it up. In my mind, a lot of this discussion, like individualism, is either extent of such a spectrum, if there is one, is unfeasible. It is bad. It is some form of tyranny. Full individualism, where you are a completely solipsistic psychopath that does not care about other people, is bad. Collectivism, to an extent where the needs of minorities are made subservient to a greater whole that is usually representative of a totalitarian state, also bad. So that's like, that's my take. As I don't really like looking at these options. I don't think individualism and collectivism are really two things that I think are very important things to consider, and I would rather take things on case by case bases. And in many ways, in many ways, what is the collective good? Collectivization is going to be beneficial for most people, and so really, like, for 99% of political cases, what would be considered quote unquote collectivist is going to be also part of mutual self-interest. And also, I would argue that a lot of action to promote civil liberties, to promote social justice and things like that, and economic redistribution are self-motivated things. This is sort of why means testing is bad. For example, like the idea, I think, like, what was the most laughably bad thing that came out of the Kamala Harris campaign was the statement that she was going to have a student loan forgiveness program that was going to be for Pell Grant recipients who start businesses for 2 years in disadvantaged communities. Like, means testing in such a capacity means that it's not that keeping such a system alive. Like the whole statement about, like, free university, right? Like the attack on free university was, well, do you want Donald Trump to send his kids to university for free? Well, like, first of all, it's a public university. They wouldn't send their kids there anyway. But still, yes, Donald Trump should be able to send his kids to university for free. And here's why. Because programs that are universal and things that are collectively benefit everybody will mean that they are promoted out of an individualist sense of self-interest. And so if you can have something that is a universal benefit and benefits everybody, then it is way more likely to get widespread popular support than, say, like a means-tested program. Like, this is why something like a universal income is a stronger program from austerity, but also probably for popularity than, say, a welfare program, like, as an example, because everybody getting the income means that everybody has a self-interested stake in its continuance and improvement. From those who it's just a small part of a huge amount of income that they already get, to, like, Jeff Bezos gets $1,000 a month, he won't care. But, like, a person who their $1,000 a month is all they have to live on, both of them help. Now, there are cases in which, there are special criteria, like things like disability benefits and things like that, like, make total sense because, it's a benefit for people who are physically or mentally incapable of working, which is fine. We have way more than enough wealth in our society to help people who can't work. We could probably have about 40% of people in our society not work and be fine. So we shouldn't worry about that. But unfortunately, programs that have those kinds of those sort of means testing and those kinds of ways to try and not make them collective will, it will weaken the program overall and make it more vulnerable politically. Oh yeah. Like, I'm not, like, what's it called? We can go into the details of, like, about how universal income would need a lot of different things to work. Like, a lot of universal income proponents use it at the expense of needed benefits. Like, a lot of times universal income is used to try and take money away from people, like disability benefits. And the market economy, a market economy would just be able to quickly readjust. And so if you don't have laws in place to keep your rent from just go, like, if you make $1,000 a month, like, getting a letter the next day from your landlord saying that your rent just went up by $1,000 a month, or prices just increasing to compensate. Yeah, if you don't do that, then yeah. And of course, if it's not paired with redistributive taxes, then it's not really going to do a lot as well. Because like a universal income that goes to everybody, but is taken primarily from a tax that comes from like the upper 1% or something like that. Because like in many ways, that aspect of it is important. The fact that you are making rich people less rich and enriching everybody else, because the absolute amount of money is actually not as important to the overall function of universal income than is the proportion of the money being held by different groups of people. But yeah, there are a lot of good ways. So what? We're almost at 1 o'clock, and I am at, the last question I read was from 12:16, so I'm doing great. Stalin didn't really fall into these categories. Okay. A lot of people want the U.S. to return to the moon at some point in the 2020s and maybe even go to Mars after that. Do you think it would be wrong to spend money and resources on something like that when it seems like the U.S. economy is going to be pretty shit for most of the 2020s? I mean, maybe not, just because, like, the thing is, like, our economic problems are not based on there being not enough stuff to go around. So, like, we have more stuff. We have enough stuff that everybody could have pretty much all the stuff they want. And we wouldn't have to worry about it. We have lived in a post-scarcity economy since, like, the 1990s. So the problem isn't going to the moon. In fact, going to the moon is probably a good long-term investment in our overall, well-offness as a species, because the moon is going to be a place where, like, it's a place that is terrestrial but has a low gravity well. So if we want to go to Mars, or if we want to go and, mine asteroids or something like that, we're going to need permanent presence on the moon of some capacity. But like, because we're not going to be able to like build a ship that can travel for 6 straight months, that can also leave the Earth's gravity well. Like, we're not going to be able to build a ship that big on Earth and also be able to send it into space. It's just not going to happen. So, with that being said, if we, like, what's it called? That's a perfectly fine project, and I completely support it. But, that's not an effect on the U.S. economy. Like, if you look at, like, the U.S. economy and U.S. Spending, the United States is basically just a military with a really, really small side project of running a government. Trust me, if you're looking for places to redistribute wealth, NASA's not really the part you need to be going to. Now, if NASA were 1% of U.S. discretionary funding, we'd be able to be doing so much more, but we aren't. What really needs to be done is there needs to be mass, like, the U.S. is such, like, it's kind of hard to comprehend just how massively wealthy the United States is. That's a real thing. It's just that almost all of the money involved goes to the military. It has, like, there's like a $2 trillion military? And, like, human brains can't even comprehend of $1 trillion. We can't even comprehend $1 billion. Like, see you later, Lugster. We have scarce trouble even comprehending $100 million. And that doesn't even count the shadow budget, which is the amount of money that the U.S. military uses for things like DARPA and like intelligence and stuff like that. So in that case, like, NASA is like one of like investing in like space stuff is is like small potatoes. It's like trying to lose weight by clipping your toenails. What are going to be the long-term effects of keeping schools closed for a year? I already answered that one. Is there a big COVID denial culture in Canada like in the US? There's a little bit of one. It's not as pronounced as it is in America, I don't think. We have had like there has been like one or two like anti-lockdown protests. There are some people who've done like random like hugs, not masks protests. But like by and large, it's like those people are kind of mocked by the media, and like there's no mainstream political party that's like advocating. Like the conservatives are like the most like biggest opposition to stuff that's been going on with COVID is like the conservatives complaining that that the government's spending too much on it, on things like our COVID, our emergent, like we have this we basically have this like emergency employment insurance program that is more or less paying out employment insurance to people who lost their jobs until the crisis is over. And so like that's been going for a while, like ever since, like, so people have been getting like money if they lost their jobs because of COVID, and they have been for months now. So that's kept a lot of people a lot more stable and a lot less worried about like lockdown and more worried about public health and safety. And there is a COVID, like I'm not going to deny that there's COVID denial going on. It's just mostly like weird conspiracy ideas imported from the US and on a much smaller minority of people than what's going on in the US. We don't have like a Republican Party that's like trying to actively like spread the virus or anything like that. So we've been fairly lucky in that sense. How is unemployment in Canada because of COVID? It's pretty intense. Like businesses, like right now, businesses are starting to reopen very slowly. Ontario just entered phase 3 of reopening, which means that now like restaurants and stuff are starting to reopen at like very, very small rates because our COVID infection rate is now pretty low. In Ontario, we had 160 cases yesterday for the whole province. And there are some other places where like that's even lower. It's still pretty bad in Quebec, but even Quebec, it's on the downslope. But we have gone into phase 3 of reopening. There might be an uptick, but I doubt it, because people seem to be taking it pretty seriously here, and we're doing a good job. Like right now, we're kind of like we're getting there. And as long as we can keep, 160 is high for Ontario. Today was 130. There you go. Like, so things are getting better, COVID-wise. And so now it actually is like an appropriate time to cautiously reopen. Like we now have bars and stuff like that open up again. So we're kind of getting to the other side of it in a small way. We're getting back to about as normal as you can be before the vaccine becomes widespread. Which, by the way, there was like a pretty big, step forward on the vaccine that was announced in the Lancet like yesterday, which is pretty good news. I could talk about that too. But right now, Canada is getting close to about as normal as we can be without a vaccine. The crisis, the big spike, is pretty much over, and like, until the U.S. gets its shit under control, the border is going to be locked down, which will probably be until sometime next year, I imagine. So at the moment, everything is kind of opening up again. There's not going to be any sports, obviously, but we are where we are. I'm going to go get my first post-COVID haircut on Thursday, so that's fun. But I mean, we earned this stuff. We learned it. It took a long time. We had what's it called? We were in lockdown. Like, we didn't start opening up until, like, last month. Like, it was, like, June. Maybe, like, late May that we started really doing stuff. And, yeah, in some places, like, population centers. Like, right now, we had, like, 160 cases, I think, on Friday. And, 160 cases happened on Friday. But, like, almost all... Like, there is, like, one outbreak in Kitchener, which is based on our migrant worker program. But other than that, they're almost all located in Toronto. Like, the city I live in, London, had a single case in the last week. So we are where we are. Like, that's the kind of stuff we're into. So we're keeping ourselves safe on that thing. All right, we're just about getting to the part where the chat is starting to scroll on me, which means I've been way too slow. Okay. So we should probably move along. Yeah, and also, like, many places have mandated mask wearing now. Suppose I went back in time to 100 AD and tried to... Yeah, there was a big story in Canada of, like, on Victoria Day weekend, there was a bunch of people who went to a park in Toronto, and the story was that these people are all being dangerous idiots. So if that has any statement. Okay. Suppose I went back in time to 100 AD and tried to introduce stock companies to the Roman Empire. Do you think they'd go for it? I doubt it. They would probably have issues with the idea of, like, why are you making money by manipulating things? It should be done through hard labor of your slaves. Like, they had an economy that was so agrarian based that it'd be hard to them to conceive of financialization in such a capacity. So apparently in the early 20th century, there was a movement called the Austro-Marxists, a bit like Euro-communists, who proposed something like a national personal autonomy. Essentially, nations would be organized into non-territorial parliaments you'd sign into, and they would manage cultural affairs that way, schools without nation states. Do you think that's viable? I don't know what the details on that, to be honest. Let's see. National personal autonomy. Essentially, nations would get organized into non-territorial parliaments you'd sign into. I mean, I think it would be a better situation than what we have now, but I would rather we have more, like, commune-focused stuff. That would be hard to... it'd be hard to keep so many parallel power structures running at the same time in the same places. I could imagine that being trouble for things like jurisdictional stuff and... like making things like investment in things like infrastructure and transit and et cetera, et cetera. So apparently there's this theory called the Lang model in which the state owned the means of production, but there was still a market that allocated supply and demand instead of planning. Do you think that's a good model? Oh, fuck no. Markets are a antiquated and bad way to manage the information that is needed to run an economy. Like, maybe it was better in cases like better than a planned economy like 50 years ago, but we're nowhere close to that now. We have computer systems that could manage our economy way better than markets and prices could. And with that, we could control what it incentivizes way better than what we're doing now. You know, so that we could, like, do stuff like prioritize happiness and, enjoyment of life and sustainability instead of, like, what makes more money. Suppose the Overton window in the U.S. drifted leftwards to about where Canada is. What would result in Canada going even further leftwards? They could keep saying they're better than the U.S. Probably. Sadly enough. American political culture affects us pretty immensely in Canada, so I imagine that would be part of it. If America had elected Bernie Sanders, for example, there would have been a lot more energy probably for, like, social democrats in Canada because his ideas would have, like, been validated by being American. And so, yeah, it would have totally happened. It probably already did happen. Like, we had sort of like a Bernie Sanders-esque candidate for the NDP leadership race in the last leadership race. And open socialism is now a lot more of, like, a thing that you can talk about here, so... You know how most academics asserts racism means racial prejudice plus power rather than just racial prejudice? If most people understand the word to just mean racial prejudice, what gives you guys the right to say it means something different? Because this is, like, what gives them the right to take the meaning of said word? Like, it's always been a power structure thing. The turning it into just meaning straight up bigotry is not a thing that was that was like, you know, just a colloquial definition that needs to be reframed. It's just that, like, individualizing racism like that is a way to dismiss problems rather than actually do anything. So it's a way to try and dismiss racism rather than what you would think rather than you know, them just having a different understanding. It is intentionally to try and dismiss systemic racism, to defang it and to say it doesn't exist. There's been a few attempts at making computer communism, e.g. Cybersyn in Chile, OGAS in USSR, essentially economic planning as well as allocation that was done electronically via data. Now these two models were different. OGAS was a lot more advanced, but more centralized too, and I wonder if that would be possible in a democratic manner. Yeah, you would just debate over what it incentivizes and what we would program things towards. It would totally be doable. Probably would be easier, way more. There'd be way more democratic control of an economy if it was run by a computerized system than if it was done through, like, markets and stuff. I'm not saying put the kids back in school now, but even before COVID, there was signs of internet-based schools working in Tory government ministries to favor them over public schools. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not an ideal solution, but, like, what alternative do we have? We're in a pandemic. You know what? We can default to internet-based schooling during pandemics. We can go back to in-person schooling when there are not pandemics. Okay. Let's assume that the state controls capital, e.g. all banking is public, sovereign wealth funds, assuming that there's also decent social democratic safety net and all workplaces are cooperatives. Would that be a good model for socialism? Let's see. Not really, because it would still be financialized. There would still be money. And I think that the existence of money is going to cause wealth inequality, and it's going to cause poverty no matter what. That is the thing that needs to be taken out of the system. So I take it you never ran Curse of Strahd. No, I have not. Do trans women have residual misogynist behavior from them being socialized male? Like, do you, like, you know how often men talk over or talk down to women? Like, many trans women keep doing that but kind of thing after transitioning. I meant this for Mia, but if you want to take a shot at it. I don't know. I know that there's a little bit of, like, fighting the, you know, your assigned genders socialization, but I don't really have much I can say to it, obviously. Okay. So Deleonism apparently suggests that the economy and parliamentary politics would be organized along syndicalist lines, i.e. all economic organizing as well as voting in elections into Congress should be done via trade unions and syndicates. Would that be a viable model? Man, everyone's like, Christos is just like, I'm going through every single socialist tendency. What do you think of this one? Is this one good? How about this one? How about this one? Is this one good? What about the one where we nuke the planet? Is that one good? I don't know. Let me check. I mean, I am definitely a fan of syndicalism. I do think that, like, you know, hospitals being run by medical unions makes sense to me. Things like, you know, like different trade sector unions banding together to manage that aspect of the economy feels pretty good to me. Okay. Let's see. Suppose Germany hadn't been forced to pay harsh reparations after World War I. Do you think that it would have prevented the rise of the Nazis and ultimately World War II? The other day, Radiolab implied that in an episode about 1918. I mean, we don't know for sure. A lot of contingent factors, but people do think that it was part of like the overall thing that sort of rose the temperature and made people mad after World War I for sure. To suggest that it would have, like, to say with any sort of confidence that it would have stopped World War II is a bit much. Okay. Okay, let's see. Scrolling for some more questions. Here we go. Which is good because I was starting to fall behind. Okay. Suppose you could go back in time and kidnap your 8-year-old self for a few hours. What would you tell them? Get organized. Whenever My Life Organized comes out, get it immediately and have it dictate your entire life, because that'll have you way more in control of all the stuff that you're doing. I'd probably also just like tell them that, like, you know, life is way easier than you think it is right now. And you're going to spend a lot of time looking back at the time that you're in right now and thinking about how easy high school was and how easy college was. And if you had just put even a little bit of effort into it, you would have done a lot better. So that's like that'd be my advice, is to get organized. Because right now you're living in chaos, utter chaos. Maybe an 8-year-old would be too young for that, but teenager me for sure. Is it possible to be artistically valuable but have no entertainment value? Hell yeah. There's so much like great art that is intentionally difficult to watch or difficult to enjoy. It doesn't have to be aesthetically pleasing to be artistically important, for sure. Like there's art for political statement. Like I'm trying to think of one that comes to mind right now, but yeah, there are things. The fact that like one of the coolest pieces of art that Banksy did was a piece of art that destroyed itself is an example. Would they get sleepy or asphyxiate? Apparently they would fall asleep, and yeah. So if you remove the oxygen, keep the CO2 from building up, you don't really get panically feeling of suffocation, but instead just tingly in the extremities and also delirious and possibly even euphoric, because the brain starts to gradually shut down from lack of oxygen. Yeah, it's what they do with dogs and cats and stuff like that, usually. Let's see. Tell us more about Giuseppe Stromboli. One of my favorite memes of the last month. Where somebody was like reimagining Harry Potter as an Italian-American stereotype. Pretty great. The name is objectively hilarious, Giuseppe Stromboli. Giuseppe Stromboli and the Goblet of Vino is the best Harry Potter book, and or the best Giuseppe Stromboli book, I should say. And for a little bit, I was entertaining seriously making my next D&D character based on Giuseppe Stromboli. So I doubt it's going to happen, because I don't think a character that is a character where the concept is the character is an Italian-American stereotype would have a lot of legs and last for a long time. Every time they call Churchill an elderly baby, I remember that you write for them. Yes, it's true. Every time that Churchill's called an elderly baby, that's because I wrote it. I'm glad that they keep that going. Yeah, I love writing for the Cold War is fun. I'm just going back to it after a couple months of hiatus from writing for it, and your boy Tristan gets to write the script. My next script is on the founding of the CIA and the NSA, and Tristan gets to write it. So you could just imagine how that's going to turn out. I love your content, and the people need to hear what you have to say. Keep it up. Tristan, thank you for the hard work. Thank you, Dan Kong. Much appreciated. She would keep opening and closing the kitchen cabinets at 3 a.m. on a school night. Yeah, Phoebe also has learned how to open doors. So even if we try to close the door to keep her from attacking the blinds, she now very noisily and over a period of several minutes opens the door, then comes in and attacks the blinds. So, like, there's no way of winning. The exchange rate of the dollars is too high. Yeah, don't worry about it, man. Egoism. Oh man, I don't know what to say about egoism. What history do you expert in? My expertise is in post 1870 United States history. So I have like a couple areas of expertise that I was an expert in. So one, I like general, like an area that I could teach, that I taught a lot, and like if I was like I am qualified to teach university course levels on, is American history, or especially post 1870 American history. So I have a pretty good grasp on American history overall. Other than that, my work was on war on terror stuff, specifically 9/11 studies. That's why, I don't know, you guys can't see it, but this thing right there, this like little frame thing, I'm going to have it framed and put on the wall at some point, but that is photos of the old World Trade Center versus the new World Trade Center. So I studied like kind of the cultural impact and the rewriting of history that happened after 9/11. And I also studied memorials for a year for my master's thesis. And on top of that, my research also veered into technology history, and the history of communication, the history of the development of mass media, especially the internet and cable, the development of cable news, the development of the internet, and the development of internet media. So like that sort of like that was also like areas that I studied. I also was in digital history, which means that I have some training on using digital tools like big data tools and data analytics tools to study history. That was sort of the stuff that I was into back when I was a PhD student. See, back then I was much smarter than I am today. The other day, one of the liberal podcasters said he doesn't agree with communists when we say all workers are exploited. I emailed him and said when we talk about exploitation, it doesn't mean all workers are treated like shit. We mean workers have been paid less than their full value of labor. Did I get that right? I haven't read the whole lot of theory. Yeah, that's about right. The fact that you're not getting the full amount of money for your work is exactly what exploitation is. Universal income can only work with some price control, like rent control. We need rent control. God, I love Do Not Eat. It's like one of my favorite YouTubers. Social housing, yeah. Demarketizing or definancializing and demarketizing housing would also go a long way towards making the world a better place. What are your thoughts on class reductionism? You know what? The thought sign video that came out last week, pretty good explanation of what class reductionism is and what it isn't. And said in better words than I could say. So I would say that if you want to know my answer, it's pretty much on what happened, what was the subject of the thought sign video that came out last week. I dream of a shirt with rent control on it. Man, that'd be so good. I'd buy that shirt. Are you guys trolling or serious? I don't know. I would definitely love to get rid of rent. Rent should be a service. It should not be like a thing that people use to make money. What's it called? Owning houses should not be a thing that people use to build wealth. We should just like the thing, like just like food and like I think shelter is the first thing we say after food. It should not be a thing that you have to worry about having enough money to survive with, for sure. And Phoebe's here, so we can get some Phoebes in chat. That'd be nice. Okay. When communists complain about bosses Do we need to be more clear about the fact that we mean owners rather than managers? I often find when libs scoff at us for saying that we don't need bosses, it's because they're conflating managers and owners. I mean, to an extent, but also managers are sort of a useless category of people that exist to advance to advance the bourgeoisie's interests. So what's it called? To exist in management is not exactly does not exactly incentivize you to be pro-worker. That's for sure. Even if you are in fact a worker. Thoughts on birria tacos? I don't even know what those are. How's unemployment in Canada because of COVID? I mean, I think it's higher than it is, but it's not as bad as in America. Canada's gone into a shit ton of debt, though. Like, the unemployment insurance, like the government has, instead of like letting the economy collapse, like the United States did, Canada put itself in a lot of debt, like kind of like a almost like, because like Canada doesn't just like, own the global money supply like America does. So like Canada put itself in like kind of a concerning amount of debt that is going to be it's going to be a little bit of a problem, but not like an insurmountable problem in our future to handle the crisis. So that's fine. What you do for surplus value extraction? I make YouTube videos and I do streams on the internet. So I guess I'm part of the petty bourgeoisie. Is that what I would call it? Please go off, oh boy. I read some alternate history novel once where the USSR and the US put out as much money into space as they do into military stuff, and as a result, by 1990, both countries have bases on Mars and Venus. Do you think that's plausible? Possibly. Kind of hard to predict what inventions are going to be. I mean, Venus, I don't know. we'd have to come up with some pretty sophisticated technology to live on Venus. That's all I gotta say. Unless they just like live in like balloon cities in the atmosphere, like that's possible. That's actually, I've been told that building like a floating city on Venus would actually be easier than making a colony on Mars, which I'm not like 100% sure on how that works, but I know that that's part of it. But like if you wanted to build a base like on the surface of Venus, where like the surface is hot enough that you could melt lead, a bit complicated. But yeah, I don't know about the timelines on that and stuff. Thoughts on Canadaland / Jesse Brown? I met him once. When he was doing his tour for Canada, the book, or whatever it was called, he came to London and I saw him once. It was actually shortly before I moved to Toronto. I don't really listen to Canadaland. I used to, but he's a bit too centrist for my taste, and also I'm not a journalist. I don't particularly give a shit about Canadian media. So I don't really find I try to keep my podcast subscriptions to a minimum. So I don't really listen to Canadaland. I used to listen to Canadaland Commons. I used to like that, but then they around 2016 they replaced the hosts of Canadaland Commons with some like really, really strong anti-Bernie people. And I was like, yeah, I don't want this shit in my life either. So I just unsubscribed. I unsubscribed to podcasts over like the smallest thing. Like I actually have I have a very Marie Kondo when it comes to my podcasts. If I don't see a new episode and it doesn't spark joy, I will not listen to it. I will unsubscribe to the podcast. I will drop podcasts like that if I don't find myself enjoying it enough. Because I always find myself with way more podcasts than I can listen to, so they might as well all be like absolute bangers. People in Manitoba never took it seriously, but I feel like we're doing well COVID-wise purely by chance and the fact that no one wants to travel there. Yeah, Manitoba doesn't get a lot of travel, and also it has a very sparse and spaced out population, so that doesn't surprise me. It's kind of like how the Arctic doesn't have a ton of cases because there's like 10,000 people who live in the entire... there's 10,000 people who live in an area that is like the size of half the United States or something like that. So yeah, it's fine. If nukes fell but somehow intercepted missiles in your state managed to catch all of them, but the other states were wiped out, do you think that the local government would stick around, or would everything instantly fall apart? I live in Ontario, and if we're talking about like Ontario surviving, yeah, I think that Canada would more or less resume under Ontario's leadership, because Canada is a very decentralized country, and so the provinces manage a lot of things themselves. So if America, or if Canada had been like nuked out of existence and Ontario was the only place that survived, we would probably be okay. Just because our government is already pretty self-sufficient, and Ottawa, the capital of Canada, is in Ontario, so that'd be good. If this was like a Jericho situation and London was the only place that existed, I don't know. It'd be a different case. Did Cypher ever find out how pissed off you got him for evoking MLK to scold the rioters? No, I don't think so. I haven't talked to him since Friday, so I don't know. Was Pierre Trudeau a good prime minister? I don't think so, because he used the FLQ crisis to basically crack down on all Quebec separatists and also just leftists in general. And he used like martial law to oppress French Canadians, so not really. So yeah, so that's that. Yeah, Pierre Trudeau, not exactly great. Would you get Robert Evans on the stream? See, the thing is, like, my connections to Robert Evans are very much like through multiple people. Like, my way of talking to Robert Evans might involve like possibly 2 or 3 degrees of separation, and it's hard to be that relentlessly networky. So I imagine that also he's a very busy guy and pretty hard to get a hold of. He's reasonably famous now, that like might be hard to do. But man, definitely interviewing him is on my dream board. That's for sure. What exactly is Dengism? Isn't that like Deng Xiaoping, like sort of like the post-Mao China trying to adopt capitalism mixed with socialism type thing, like state communism or state capitalism or whatever? Is that Dengism? I honestly don't know. Something to that extent. Stock companies became a big thing in the 17th century. Wasn't the economy also incredibly rural back then too? 17th century though, things had been drastically changed. Like, the thing is, like, the economy was starting to change around that time of the joint stock company, because joint stock companies started up as colonial projects. So as colonization started, because colonization is really like the material conditions that birthed capitalism. So joint stock companies are sort of like the beginning of capitalism that comes via people becoming more and more wealthy through trading and colonizing, rather than just like, local feudal lords type thing. Tristan got Robert Evans for the stream. You'd be so stoked. Yeah, it'd be pretty cool. I don't think I'm famous enough for Robert Evans, though, is the thing. And like, I'd have like my connections to Robert Evans would probably be like, I'm trying to think about all the connections I'd have to go through, and it would be like, I kind of am Twitter friends with like Maggie Mae Fish's partner, and Maggie was once a guest on, or twice a behind the Bastards guest host, and also worked for Cracked around the same time as him. And so I'd have to be like, hey, can I use, like, I would just feel like such a dick to be like, hey, can I like use your partner's connection with this guy to get an interview? I don't know, it would feel really sketchy for me to do. So I think I'd have to get a little bit more of my own clout in order to do such a thing, in order to be able to talk to him and have him even respond to my calls or whatever. Probably wouldn't even get out of bed for somebody who had under 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, my guess. How far into Behind the Bastards are you now? I just recently listened to the episodes on the last years of L. Ron Hubbard, so I'm getting there. Did Tristan answer my question about Game of Thrones? I didn't see a question about Game of Thrones. Who is Robert Evans? Robert Evans is a journalist who worked for Cracked and then became a podcaster and has several fairly successful podcasts that are really good. Behind the Bastards being the main one, The Worst Year Ever being sort of a more modern one that he does with Cody and Katie, who both run Cody Johnson and Katie Stoll, who are the two people who run Some More News. That's a pretty good podcast. And then also he's like done a podcast called It Could Happen Here, which was sort of, he went to Syria and did a bunch of conflict journalism, but then like he came back and sort of saw the same conditions that led to like Syria civil war existing in America, and talked about America going into another civil war, and has been like prophetic about that, by the way. Then he did a podcast called Women's War, which was he went to Rojava and wrote about his experiences there, and it's fucking amazing. It's basically like homage to Catalonia, but about Rojava. Then there's another podcast that he did called Behind the Police, which is like a history of American policing, which is also really, really good. He's just like a really well-read, history-minded conflict journalist who understands things today, and also is probably one of the world experts on the radical right, and is also an anarchist. So he's got a lot of really good stuff. Very good person, very good follow, especially if you like my stuff. People who like my stuff and people who like Robert Evans are probably pretty similar, because he's doing a lot of what I would do, just better. Actually, do you have any serious thoughts on CyberSyn? I think it didn't last long enough to have to be able to really see if it was going to work out as well, but the concept was really cool, and I like that. And I think that if we organized our economy with a computer system like that, we would work a lot better. In what way does systemic racism exist in America? Did you not see the disparities in like what's it called? There's racial disparities like in America that have never gone away, like from slavery to like, you know, the disparities in the American justice system. Like people, like white people and black people use drugs at the same rate, but black people get arrested for it and get much harsher sentences. Like there is so many ways, big and small, to show that there's a strong racist, like systemic racism that exists in America that leads to black people and people of color in general having lower economic outcomes and having and being more subject to state violence and repression. To deny that it exists is next level. How is that racist? I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't even know what that's a reference to anymore. It's been so long since that part of the discussion. Is post-leftism even a valid ideology? It's interesting, but I don't see where it's going. Cybersyn was working Allende and the government supporting him managed to bypass the CIA-induced partial truck driver strikes so much that it was one of the factors that the far right had to step up the violence level, and then Pinochet. Cool. I think I read about it in the People's Republic of Walmart book. The People's Republic of Walmart is really good. Cybersyn is probably something I'll make a video about someday. I think it was an interesting topic. I think that the idea behind it was sound. I don't know if computer technology was like at the point to make it work as well as it should have. But I think that given the developments we've made in computer technology and logistics, and logistics especially, we've had like some fucking amazing breakthroughs in terms of economic logistics. Between that and the developments in computer technology, like we could run a planned economy that would work so efficient compared to today, like so efficient. Look how Amazon can like get you almost anything that you want within 24 hours, depending upon where you are. Like, imagine if we had all of the infrastructure and technology that Amazon had to do its thing, but for everything, and it was not based on money. It was based on, things that you want or need or whatever. Just imagine how efficient and how basically like post scarcity an economy would be like that would be. I just fear private schools will fight to keep classes online to serve their own ends after the pandemic ends. Well, we'll have to fight them on that, obviously. Carlos Maza, something like that. Oh, I don't know. I don't know what that's a reference to. I did the chocolate napkin math on a trillion as well, and that gives you, by mass, a bit over 7 Great Pyramids of Giza made in purity out of chocolate. Oh boy. Jeff Bezos could make the Great Pyramid of Giza entirely out of chocolate and still have 85% of his wealth left. Holy shit. Somehow it's still impossible to visualize, yeah. I must admit that there is an issue of more powerful industries potentially having more sway. That's arguably an issue of any states with larger pops and stronger economies. Okay. Still, if we were to go to Leonist, sign me up as the MP for screenwriting. Okay. I tried to find something more easily. Okay, it's talking about visualizing $1 trillion. Yeah. What's your favorite Gracchi brother, Tiberius or the other one? I don't even know much about the Gracchi brothers, to be honest. I don't know that much about Roman history. I'll be perfectly honest. It's not really a thing that's interested me. European history in general doesn't interest me that much. Will it be okay to go back to buying Harry Potter merch if J.K. Rowling dies? I mean, her estate would still get the money, so maybe not, but it would definitely be less of a problem, but I don't know. I don't have any, like, the thing is, like, now Harry Potter to me is going to be permanently tainted by J.K. Rowling's transphobia to the point where I don't really have any desire to I don't even feel like I could watch the movies again without it sort of being spoiled for me. That's like the way I think about it. Like, I don't think I'm going to chastise people, but like, I just think that a lot, like, I can't separate it. Just like it's really hard to listen to like early Kesha music without thinking about the fact that she was being sexually assaulted regularly because of that. Hey, Proles Comdom 1917, welcome to the York Gang. Thank you for following. So, yeah. So like Harry Potter sort of like has that sort of shadow over it for me. It was already, like Harry Potter had already fallen quite high before everything happened. Hey, Slippery Biscuits 6969. Thank you for following. Welcome to the York Gang. Much appreciated. Just because like Harry Potter like already like was being associated with like ineffectual liberalism and sort of like read another book and just like the most irritating people on the internet, and so I already got tired. Okay. Hey, Demiurge Lemur. That's a good one, too. Welcome to the York Gang. Thank you. I really want to read All Is Quiet on the Western Front. I'll have fun with that. Have you thought about making a video about eunuchs? They're pretty interesting, not quite cis group that had a lot of power in societies. It's crossed my mind, but it's not something that I would need a better story, you know? Like, I don't really like making videos about just, like, here's a thing that existed. There's got to be some sort of like narrative element, some sort of story, something that I can like emotionally latch onto to make it more compelling, because to just be like, eunuchs existed, this is what they could do, is not like a fascinating video. But if there was like a famous eunuch, like say Shongha, who you tell his story and talk a lot about how that shows about the story of eunuchs in Chinese society, then you could definitely, I could see more of a video like that than just like eunuchs, the concept. What's the most positive thing to come from socialism? Weekends, the 8-hour workday, those are some big ones. The 5-day work week. The fact that children don't work in factories. Those are the big ones, I would think. What caused Building 7 to collapse? A building fell on it. The thing about Building 7 is that a lot of the times the 9/11 truther conspiracy theory people try to make you think that it was just a fire that made it fall down, or that's what they want you to think thing is. And they show you some photos, but the problem with Building 7 is that the structural damage that the building took was very hard to photograph on the day that it happened, because to get it at the right angle, you would have to be going into a dangerous area. But more or less, if you look at Building 7, and there are a few photos still that show this. Conveniently, 9/11 truthers don't really show these pictures, but you can see that the debris from the collapsing World Trade Center towers knocked out a huge chunk of the building, which left it very structurally unsound, and it collapsed. So, and also there was a raging fire inside, which did do structural damage. If there wasn't a fire, the building might have still been able to stand, but like they did a thing. The firefighters realized that the building was not safe to send people into anymore, so they decided to pull it, which means that they're basically going to abandon the building and let it collapse, because they knew that it was like there was no saving that building. They tried to though, but it was just the damage was much more extensive than they thought it was on the day. And unfortunately, that's another thing that 9/11 truthers do, is they take a lot of like footage and stuff. They take a lot of footage and stuff that that was stuff happening like on the day of 9/11, where like a bunch of chaos was happening and mixed messages and bad radios and like all sorts of like it was a disaster, literally. And so just chaos was everywhere. And they take like contradictory stories and be like, look, therefore the conspiracy theories are true. But yeah, like it's pretty well documented that like the debris, like if you read the 9/11 Commission report, you can see pretty clearly that like the debris that fell off of the World Trade Center knocked out like a quarter of the building, and yeah, its structures were pretty much starting to go. What's surplus value again? It's surplus value. It's the amount of value added to a commodity by your labor time being added to it. So like if you have a pile of wood that you then work into a chair, that is what's it called? If you have like a pile of wood that you work into a chair and you spend like 6 hours working on it, you are adding 6 hours of surplus value to the chair. Or no, that's just value. Surplus value, I think, is when then you're able to sell something for more than the labor value put into it, which means you get extra money that is that actually is more than the actual value of the commodity, and therefore you enrich. You are taking more from the value of the object or of the commodity rather than like than it's worth, if that makes sense. Wait, you have information about the old World Trade Center, like what statues were there, what it looked like? My focus for my master's thesis was on the rebuilding of 9/11, or the rebuilding of the World Trade Center. So my master's thesis for history was on the project to rebuild the World Trade Center, i.e. The Freedom Tower, which is the sort of like shard building that now basically like dominates the Manhattan skyline. And also the Pitt Fountain Memorial, where they have the memorials that are these two footprints of the old towers that are turned into these massive fountains, and sort of like the fight between different types of interests to build a memorial and a museum and a tower, because it was extremely valuable business real estate. And on top of that, it was, it had to be a site where they had to justify the perpetual war on terror. And on top of that, it had to be a memorial for the people, the 3,000 people who died there. So, yeah. Your work memorials included racist historical actors, anything that was toppled or vandalized. My work was on dark tourism. So it was on stuff like the construction of the 9/11 memorial, but also like comparing it to things like the Anne Frank House and some other like Auschwitz and things like that, and like how to design a memorial to commemorate dark periods of history. That was sort of like my memoriology study of the World Trade Center site in New York City. Hey, I'm not reading that one. You should definitely wear a mask. Not wearing a mask is not welcome on Orc Gang territory. So, I'm sorry, I'm not reading your name. What work do you do? Are you talking to me? Like, I make YouTube videos and I stream. And I freelance write for Kings and Generals / The Cold War, and I edit Mexi's videos. Those are like all of my things that I use to make money. Well, There's Your Problem podcast is legit better than anything Chapo ever made. Yeah, Well, There's Your Problem is definitely a good podcast. I like it. I didn't realize until later that it's about much more than engineering. Okay. Why does Western academia push Marxist ideas on youth? It doesn't. It pushes liberal ideas on youth. Universities tend to put, like, except for like the odd Marxist professors who, let's be honest, aren't taken very seriously at universities. For the most part, universities spread, like, most professors are upper middle class urban professionals. So like they typically have a sort of like centrist, socially liberal, but still like in favor of non-redistributive economics. For the most part, like most professors are centrist. But also because universities and academia are one of the few places where you can actually express academic freedom and research your own stuff, there are some Marxist professors who get to, exist. And, they teach classes, but like there's not that many of them, and fairly often they're rather sidelined in schools. Like when I was in history at Western, I was probably the only person who could actually be considered like a straight up leftist, at least at the time. I think one other PhD student has become a socialist after the fact. But like 2015, 2016, I was, I think, if not the only, one of the only like actual left-wing people in the department. There was a lot of liberals, there was a lot of conservatives, there may be some social democrats and some people who would be sort of like progressive liberals, but as far as like, I was definitely the only anarchist because I got in a lot of shit in like graduate seminar classes for being an anarchist, but also I think I was probably the only like straight up like yeah, capitalism needs to be destroyed type people in my history department. So I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And you know who doesn't say that universities indoctrinate people to become Marxists? People who have spent any time at university. Well, it's just like angry boomers who are mad that their kids got an education and came back and said, hey, did you realize racism's bad? And they're like, racism bad? Marxists! It's more or less a story. Norman Yeatus, great name. I don't think you had a question, but I just wanted to give attention to the fact that there is somebody in this chat named Norman Yeatus. Best name. Thank you. Thank you for that name. Yeah, someone's going to definitely clip the Marxist thing, probably. Are freelance journalists proletarians? Yeah, pretty much. They're like much more precarious than your average worker, that's for sure. The precaritariat, isn't that a word people are using now? What is Candleland? No, it's Canada Land. Canada Land is a podcast about Canadian media that is pretty popular here. It's like one of the bigger podcasts probably in the country. It's run by a guy named Jesse Brown, who's probably like a liberal. Sir Johnny MacDonald would be considered a fascist in today's standards. I mean, he was pretty genocidal, and all. Luckily, the best thing about Johnny MacDonald is that his horrible genocidal like ideas were undermined by the fact that he was such a fucking alcoholic that he could barely get anything done, and like regularly passed out in Parliament and stuff like that. For anyone who doesn't know, Johnny MacDonald is the first Prime Minister of Canada. Do you think Peter Kropotkin would have been considered a celebrity/hero if he were alive today? I'd hope so. We're gonna rock down Electric Boogaloo. We're getting close to the end of the stream though, so let's see what we can do. I kind of like some of Candleland's content, but I think that, yeah, Jesse is like the Canadian Cenk Uygur. A lot of bluster and bad takes. Yeah, that's not a bad comparison, to be honest. Thoughts about war between U.S. and Canada? Hope it never happens. It would be very, very destructive, and it would probably very quickly turn into a quagmire for America. It's such a big country, and it has so many armed citizens who can just like move, like, you know, disappear into rural areas, and would be just an absolute pain in the ass for any occupation force. So, yeah, I wouldn't expect it to be a fun thing for anybody. All right, it is 2:00. This has been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful stream. We had lots of really good questions. I feel like, what's it called? What time did we end at? We were still on 1:30, so 27 minutes behind. That's not bad. Let's go see who we should raid for everybody who is on Twitch with me. The Surfs.
Nor that they...
This is, I don't know what this is. Surfs is like doing something. All right, let's raid Casey Explosion. Always good value. Because Rakutansky is sick, and so is taking a hiatus from streaming. So let's go see Casey. Go say hi to her for me. Get some sloth energy going in here. See a wonderful Irish lady play some video games. For everybody else, have a great one, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.